So we are coming to an end over here. I believe maybe tomorrow we'll finish. If not, then next week we'll be finishing the book of Shmuel. So it would be advisable to consider buying a book of Melachim, of Kings, or if you have a entire Tanakh, then it's included there. I don't know what book you're using, but hopefully in a week or hopefully next week we'll be starting the book of Kings, Met Hashem. And one of the things I hope to do is print out the certificates. I've been a little behind in that.
You mean preoccupied, right? Preoccupied.
Gee, I've been checking my mail every day for.
What is that?
I've been checking my mail every day. To see if it's...
Right.
They call it overworked.
So yeah, hopefully we'll get some of those out. I'll tell you the truth. I want to send both the laws of Shabbos, which you all concluded, and that was a long 2-year endeavor. The laws of Shabbos, and so I'd like to include that as well as and the tractate Chagiga. So we got a few things, a few certificates to send out.
By the end of the year, you can have the whole thing.
Yeah, but the problem is we're all spread out, so it's hard to do in an official way.
I'm waiting to put those on my resume, so that'll be welcome when I get it. Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Okay.
And when you correct my name on the first one, I would appreciate it too.
Oh, you know what? I think I printed yours with the correction. I emailed it even to you, but I never mailed it. I think I emailed it to you.
Mail them all together.
Now I'll mail them all together, Mitzvah Hashem. Okay, I'll have to check it over. Okay, so we are learning the book of Shmuel Beis. We're at the end. We're in chapter 24, and we have been discussing, and I know I do make you people a little crazy because I try to bring in all the different commentaries and the different opinions, but that's part of the fun of trying to get the whole picture and not just limiting your understanding to a very surface level. We're trying to see different ways, all the different ways of understanding it. So
it sure helps me.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. So we were learning about this chapter. In the beginning of the chapter, it talked about what caused Hashem, we spoke out what caused Hashem to be angry, different opinions, but it's a little complicated because what we were explaining was there are certain things that made Hashem angry. Hashem was angry at this point, and his anger flared against Israel. And what did he do? So Hashem incited David to do a sin that would bring about punishment to the Jewish people, which means that David himself must have done something wrong as well that caused God to want to incite him. So the Jewish people did something wrong that caused God to get angry. David must have done something wrong that caused Hashem to want to incite him to sin. And ultimately, there's going to be this punishment that they're going to get when David does this sin. And so we spoke a number of things, and one of the interesting things was that they didn't complain enough about building, they didn't beg Hashem enough about building the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, David might have asked Hashem to build it, and he showed very strong interest in building the Beis HaMikdash, but the Jewish people, we don't find on their part. That was it's a very powerful message that they don't, and the reason it's so powerful is especially because these people didn't have a Beis HaMikdash in their time that they saw destroyed, that they would complain for a Beis HaMikdash. We didn't physically see the Beis HaMikdash, but we know the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. And so we, for sure, have to learn from that. How much more should we complain to Hashem and beg Hashem that he rebuild, that we want the Beis HaMikdash, because we once had it already. And being that we had it already and it was destroyed, it's even more should be more painful to us that we don't have it. So this is an encouragement. This is an inspiration for us to beg Hashem. In our davening, we have it written there, but do we mean it? Yes, David.
This is as it connected to that the Rebbe spoke about the importance of Kiddush Levana, and nobody could figure out why Kiddush Levana. So in Kiddush Levana, it says that the people requested requested Mashiach. Up until that time, it wasn't happening, such a request. And I think it was either the Beis Hamikdash or Mashiach. And it says in there, Bikshu so I forget the Lashon, but you know what I'm talking about?
I'm not specifically, I mean, we do say David Melch Yisrael Chav Kayom, which, and it says also about Makabitz al Agvois, that he's looking through the holes to come, peeking through the hole. What?
It says the word Bikshu by Kiddush Levana, Bikshu.
I have to look it up then.
Okay.
Bikshu. Let's see. Here's a siddur here. Let's see if it's in this. I mean, we beg Hashem there. It says, Lamalois pegimas halavana, to fill the blemish of the Levana, that the moon was made small and it won't be any more small, and the light of the moon will be like the light of the sun, like it was before. Oh, the end of it is Uvikshu as Hashem Elokehem ve'is David Malcolm Amen. Aha. So we should fulfill that pasuk, Uvikshu, which is a pasuk in Hosea. Not commonly learned, but it does say they begged Hashem, their God, and David, their king. So that pasuk is specifically referring to Mashiach. I mean, the whole thing is to a certain extent, the Levana, the whole concept of the moon is about Mashiach. But yeah, good point. Interesting. So it says the word Uvikshu, to beg. So you're thinking that's a thought why the Rebbe put an emphasis on doing it in public, the Kiddush Levana.
Yeah, that's what people were saying, that why from all the mitzvahs that the Rebbe could emphasize was it specifically Kiddush Levana out of the clear blue sky. So
Interesting. So in other words, the word Bikshu, it's not enough that fact that we have this prayer, Yehi Ratzoin Milfanecha, these type of things, but Bikshu is like more stronger word terminology. Okay. I think the davening, it's the prayer itself has some strong statements, but that's good. That's good. Bikshu, yes, to request, to beg. Okay, good point. So anyway, getting back to what we were talking about here. So they sin by not begging Hashem for Mashiach, for the Beis Hamikdash, I should say, for building Beis Hamikdash, and that at least is according to one way of understanding it. Of course, there's other ways of understanding it, which we mentioned, and the fact that they joined the enemy, they were unfaithful to David, and so on, and ultimately, and we also mentioned about David inciting, saying that Hashem is causing Shaul to fight, to run after him, even though David meant well. And I think that's a very powerful point, actually, because we're going to see this again, that David said something that for you and me would not be considered anything wrong. In fact, it would be considered righteous, maybe. But because David said it, it was considered like inappropriate. What is that? David told Shaul, he says, I know you're running after me to kill me, and you think I have something against you, but Hashem put in your mind and incited you to do this. There's really no reason for you to be running after me because I have nothing against you. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't want to hurt you in the future. And the fact that you're running after me and chasing me is because Hashem incited you to do this, obviously. Now, what was he basically saying? He's basically saying something very nice, that Shaul is, you're not a cruel person. You're a good person. He's basically telling Shaul, you're a good person. And you have this ruach ra, maybe like this bad spirit that got to you, and Hashem is pushing you. So he seems to be saying something nice to him. right? But at the same time, it's actually implying like Hashem incites people to fight other people. Hashem incite, that's not an appropriate statement for David to say. Did he mean it that way? No. But the wording terminology of saying something like that was inappropriate. And that's a very powerful idea, how, you could sometimes say things that are actually nice, but it gives a negative implication about Hashem. Yes, Ben.
I wanted to say that to me, it's more serious what David did when he blamed Hashem on Shaul's actions than for the people not to ask to build a Beit HaMikdash. They paid for the Mishkan, they did whatever Moses asked them to do, and they asked for a king. They said, we want to be like all the other nations. To be like other nations, you're not asking to build a Beit HaMikdash. You're asking to be like the other nations.
I'm not sure what you're emphasizing. So,
in other words, I can't blame the people for not asking to build a Beit HaMikdash yet.
Why?
Because they never said they will. Or
Who cares if they said they will?
They never were told to do it by Hashem either, did they?
V'asuli migdash v'shachanti b'seicham. Build for me a temple, and I will dwell in it. It's a mitzvah to have a Beis HaMikdash. And they knew that the Shiloh and the Mishkan, these were all temporary. They knew, and Noiv and Givon, all these places are temporary, and they're waiting, and they're aware of that. That this is not the way things should be, and they know that it was destroyed, and the temporary ones were destroyed. So it would be obvious that they should be they should be requesting.
But did they, at this point, did they conquer already all of Israel, or there were still places that were not conquered? They still didn't finish conquering all of Israel.
Well,
I think that blaming God for anything is terrible.
Not blaming
Especially
God, but
blaming
asking.
him for Shaul's doing. I thought that was a bad sin.
So inciting, by saying Hashem incited Shaul. But he didn't mean it that way. He's not blaming Hashem. He meant to say it in a way that Shaul is not responsible for himself, and he's really a good guy. And that's what he was trying to say, that Hashem put something in his mind. He meant it in a positive way. It's just the way it came out, the way it sounds.
Positive for Shaul.
But he doesn't even mean something bad about Hashem.
Yeah.
It's just the way it sounds is bad. It sounds wrong. Right. Hashem had a reason why he did it, why he wanted Shaul to do it. But it just sounds wrong that Hashem incited you. You just can't say those words. And maybe David can't say those words. Maybe we could, because when we're talking,
I wouldn't do it either.
But it's just the term is inappropriate especially for
Yosef said to his brothers later, don't blame yourselves because Hashem had you do this.
Right. Interesting. Now that's an interesting point. Isaac just hit a home run over here, comparing this to the story of the brothers. Look at that. That's an interesting comparison, Isaac. Very, very nice. So
selling Joseph.
What do we see there? We see that Joseph himself said such a term, that Hashem sent me, but at least over there he doesn't use the words Hashem incited you to do this to me.
At the end, when they came to him afterwards and said, Yaakov, our father said you shouldn't get back at us. That's when he said there, don't let, I'll find it, hold it.
No, he said.
But did he say Hashem incited?
You meant to hurt me, Hashem meant to help me. That's what he said.
It doesn't use the word incited. It doesn't use the word that Hashem incited you. So in that case, I think that would be the major difference. There's no, like here, it's the term the fact that Hashem did this is obvious. Ruach Ra, there's some Ruach Ra that Hashem put in him. The truth is there. It's just the term. You don't use that term. At least David shouldn't use that term when he talks about Hashem. Susan, you had a question.
I was just going to say that God is responsible for everything, and we have to pay attention to what his needs are, what he wants, and the fact that today we still don't have a place for him to rest. We still don't have a base of mid. So I don't understand why we haven't done anything about that.
So we daven every day now. Do we have?
But does that take the place of the building?
It's as much as we can do. We can't just go and build a temple without Hashem giving us the go ahead. But we can pray and tell God we want things to be better for you and for the Jewish people and for fulfill your wishes by having a Beis Hamikdash, and we beg you to allow us, to let us go forward and build the Beis Hamikdash. So we're asking Hashem, we're doing the right thing, we're thinking about it. The issue there is that it was not on the front of their minds, of their it wasn't on the the first thing that they're thinking about. It wasn't on their priority list. And it really connects with what Ben mentioned, that they did ask for a king. We want to be like all the other nations. But did you ask to have a Beis Hamikdash? You're initiating an idea that Hashem didn't initiate. In other words, Hashem didn't tell you that we're ready for a king.
David was still teaching Torah to the people, and so they were praying too.
Just one second.
We are not the only ones praying,
But the point is that if you compare it to the fact that they did initiate having a king, why aren't they initiating having a Beis Hamikdash? To the extent that even though Hashem told David it's not the time yet for the Beis Hamikdash, Hashem still, if the Jewish people would have requested it, Hashem would have figured out a way that maybe at least they could have bought the location, maybe started doing something there, even if it wasn't time yet to build it. But at least to some extent, it would have shown Hashem that we really wanted it. Someone else had their hand up here. Yehuda? Okay, Yehuda.
Yeah, to answer Susan, when we say korbanos today, that takes the place of the sacrifices.
Reciting the words of the sacrifices, the laws of the sacrifices.
I understand that, but we have a state of Israel. We have a state. We have a place. The Jews have a place. Why we haven't gone? I don't understand why we haven't gone any farther than that.
So the point is
that the state has been there since 1948.
Right.
I'm waiting still for you. See what I'm saying? It's a long.
Yeah, you have a very good point, Susan. And the answer to your point is that it's not totally up to us to build the Beis Hamikdash. It's up to us to make it, to make the world ready, that Hashem will give us the go ahead. So we got to keep on doing those mitzvahs and make the world ready to get that message from Hashem to go forward. So that's really the real answer to the full answer to your question. Okay, so getting back to where we are over here. So Hashem ends up telling David that you said that I incited Shaul. I'm going to give you an area. I'm going to incite you, so to speak, where let's see if you end up making the right choice. I'm going to sort of like give you a hard challenge. I'm going to incite you because you said that I incite people. Okay, so let me incite you, so to speak. And let's see if you make the right choice. So obviously David had free choice in the matter, but it was in a certain sense a complicated situation where David made a mistake here. He sinned. What was the sin? So we had a long conversation about this last week, about the sin of counting the Jewish people. And it really boils down to 2 points. One is the actual counting. Let me just mute everyone. There's 2 points here. One is the actual counting of the Jewish people, and the other is counting them directly or indirectly. Do you count them with coins? Counting them in person? When you count them, are you counting them for a reason? Or do you have no real good reason? Is it just for your pride? Why is David counting the Jewish people here? Is he doing it for pride? He's proud that he has such a big group of population that's under his reign, that's in his kingdom. Is he proud of that he rules over so many people? Is that why he's counting them? Is it an element of pride, or what is his reason? Does he really need this for the army? Does he really need to know how many people are in his army? Because isn't it Hashem who really fights the wars, and however many people he has is gonna have to be good enough? It's gonna work. So
Rabbi Smith, it's
yes,
Panina.
Panina. Yeah.
I maybe I shouldn't make this assumption, but I assumed that David Melech was counting for the purposes of ascertaining with regard to the army, because even though one relies on Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu,
right. So we spoke about this. Good point, Panina. We spoke about this last week. Someone asked this question. It could have been you. I'm not sure who. That makes sense to make a vessel in nature. We got to prepare ourselves practically, even though Hashem fights the wars. But the point is that what we see is that this was inappropriate. Counting the Jewish people was not something that was commonly done. It was, it was very rare. And so when it comes to war, this was obviously not something that David should have initiated. Count them for the war. Obviously, we fight our wars with, we hold swords and all that stuff, but that's where it ends. We're not going any further in preparing ourselves in more than that. Counting the Jewish people is a very delicate topic. And the point here, and I mentioned it last week as well, that Yoav was very against this. Yoav, King David's right-hand man, is very against counting the Jewish people. He tries to convince David that you shouldn't be doing this. And David says, listen, I'm the king. You have to listen to me. So this is part of Yoav's complaint, that, this is not appropriate, where we have to be very careful. Even counting them indirectly with coins, which according to one opinion, that's how Yoav counted them here. It doesn't say clearly if he used coins to count them. Did each of them have to give a coin, or did he count them some other way, indirectly, or did he count them directly? It doesn't say clearly. But even if you learn that it was indirect, but Yoav feels that this was an inappropriate, it was unnecessary. And we'll see soon that David regrets the count right afterwards. And he says, oh boy, I made a big mistake. I should never have done this. This was not necessary. So we see that this is not something appropriate, but David does fall into this mistake. He ends up tripping, and he will ask for forgiveness. So here we are on verse 4. Chapter 24, verse 4. But the king's word prevailed over Yoav and the officers of the army. So Yoav and the officers of the army who were before the king went to count the people Israel. So they said, okay, we have no choice. Now again, he might have counted them indirectly with a coin or with some other way, but at the same time, even that is wrong, because it was not necessary. It was not a necessary counting. There is a major understanding here that it might have been because David wanted to feel his pride of how much, people like to look in the bank, how much money they have, how much power they have, how much it's part of the nature of man to desire such a thing. But pride is not something in front of Hashem. It's not appropriate for for a king, and especially a king in the Jewish sense of a king. We're supposed to learn from the king. We're supposed to be a example to the people. It's supposed to be higher in spiritual great heights. Now, verse 5, they crossed the Jordan and camped in Aroer, south of the city that was in the middle of the valley of God, and then went to Yazer. So you have to remember, where is God? So if you have to picture the map of Israel, God, Reuven, God, and Chatzi, Shevet, Manasseh, Reuven, God, and half of Manasseh are on the east side of the Jordan. So Yoav is jumping all the way to all the way east to start counting the Jewish people there. The commentaries tell us the reason why he's doing this is because God were a people that didn't take they didn't just listen. They didn't just take directives. They questioned things. And he thought they would fight him. Yoav wanted the people to fight him and say, no, you can't count us. Why are you counting us? You're not allowed to count us. And he was hoping that if people made a fuss and made protests, he would be able to go back to David HaMelech and say, I don't know what to do. Maybe go ask the Navi. I don't know what to do. The people are protesting. We're having a hard time. And, we don't want this to be a civil war. He wanted some excuse to go back to David and tell him that this is not working out. Unfortunately, the people of God listened to Yoav. They didn't put up a fuss, but Yoav expected them to put up a fuss. So therefore, Yoav runs to them first, the people of this city of the people near the valley of south of the city that was in the middle of the valley of God. And that's also near Yazer, which is also a city right in that area. Again, it's on the east side of the Jordan towards the south. Now, the next verse, they came to Gilad and to the land of Tachtim Chodshi, and they came to Dan, to Dana Ya'an. Dana means the area of Dun, and Dun is on the opposite side, which is right by the Mediterranean Sea. It's like an L-shaped territory that's by the Mediterranean. The Savivel Sidon, and then they went around to Sidon. Now, so basically, Yoav went. He's trying to take his time, so to speak, to do this count. Commentaries tell us that he really did two counts, and we have a hint to it a little later. The verse uses a term that gives us this idea that it's in verse 9. It says mispar and mifkad. It uses two terms in the Hebrew. The sum of the number, the sum of the number of the people. That's like a double language. It's redundant. And so the sum of the number, it's telling us that Yoav did two things. Number one is he had more of a real count, and then he did like a count that wasn't so real. And the reason was because he was nervous to count the Jewish people. It could bring a plague, it could bring ayin hara, evil eye. So he didn't want to. He really didn't want to count them, and he was planning on giving the king a smaller number than they really calculated. So he tried to do this in a way that wasn't going to bring about Hashem's anger and bring about this plague, which it says in the Torah could come about through counting the Jewish people. So he went to these different areas, and he has this count where he's asking them how many people are in your neighborhood, how many people here, how many people in this house, how many, he's getting the numbers, putting the numbers together. And he has really two counts, one with an inaccurate amount and the other is an accurate amount. And again, the reason he wants this inaccurate amount is that's what he wants to give David HaMelech, the inaccurate amount, which will be much smaller than the accurate amount. In this way, the king's pride won't be overblown. It won't be blown out of proportion. It won't be that exciting to him. So he's going to give him, now he has this other calculation, which is a little more exact. And the reason he has that is if the king questions him, he needs to have also the right amount. But he wants to give him, and this is a Rashi, it's based on a Medrash, but Rashi brings this idea that there were two, he says it's a Medrash in the Psikta, Rashi brings it here. So it's this is one of the Midrashic interpretations of this story. In other words, it adds part of the story details that we don't have in the actual, you don't have it in the actual print. And so that's basically this counting that David HaMelech is doing. And we're in verse 7, they came to the fortress of Sor and to all the Hivite and Canaanite cities, and they went to the south of Yehuda, to Beersheba. Verse 8, they traveled around the entire land, coming back to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. So it took quite a while to make the census, and he comes up with the numbers, which we'll talk a little about Hashem tomorrow. And we'll also see that there's some discrepancies between the numbers here and the numbers in the book of Chronicles, which the commentaries have ways of explaining it, that it's not a contradiction. Okay, we're going to stop here. I'll pass the mic over to Rabbi Wernick.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. How are you?
Good afternoon.
Baruch Hashem.